refrigerations you already studied in your UG program. Okay. So first we need to understand what is the basic difference between the refrigeration and the liquefaction. Okay. So you know that refrigerator is a machine which is used for making a cold. Okay. And a liquefier is a refrigerator that produces the cold liquid and that is then drawn off. Okay. What is the meaning that in the refrigerator, if you remember that refrigerant is flowing through the all the steady flow device. Okay. So the basic principles, if you remember that refrigerant have taken the energy from the or heat from the refrigerated space, okay, and rejected to the environment. Okay. So there is a heat transfer or energy transfer from the low temperature body to the high temperature body. So we need to do some work, and that work we done on the compressor. Okay. So we need to give the work input. Okay. And then it's expand through expansion valve. If you remember that refrigerator. Okay. So here in a refrigerator operates as a closed loop. Means what happens that the working fluid is means mass flow rate of the refrigerant is same at all the steady flow devices. Okay. Means in the compressor or in valve or what is it called evaporator, condensers, everywhere the mass flow rate means whatever amount of mass entering to the device is equal to the amount of means mass flow rate leaving the device. Okay. So that's why it is called as a refrigerator operates as a closed loop. Means here the mass flow rate of the working fluid is same throughout the cycle. Okay. But in liquefier is an open system. Open system means here we have suppose a gas has been liquefied. Okay. And that liquid has been withdrawn from the system. So it is the open systems. Here the working fluid is not same throughout the cycle. Okay. So that's why here written that a liquefier is an open system. Okay. So in a closed system, the mass flow rate of the working fluid is same throughout the refrigerator. Okay. But in liquefier, the mass flow rate is not the same throughout. Okay. Now, next point is that no accumulation or withdrawal of product means we are not going to taken or withdraw the working fluid. Okay. So there is no accumulation means you can't store the working fluid. It is flowing throughout the device. Okay. Or you are not going to withdraw any working fluids. But here liquid accumulates and it is withdraw. Okay. So this is the basic difference between the refrigeration and liquefaction. Mass flow rate of the refrigerant is same at all the point of the cycle. Okay. Means everywhere I told you that mass flow rate is the same. So that's why it is called as the balanced flow conditions. Okay. Everywhere the mass flow rate is the same. That's why it is called as the balanced flow condition. Okay. But in case of the liquefaction, mass flow rate of the stream being cooled is greater than the counter current return stream. Okay. Means if you have suppose you have a liquefying the m mass. Okay. So into the liquid. So you have a take. Okay. So when this is the gas which is entering to the compressor. Okay. And which has been liquefied into the mass flow rate MF. It is called as the liquid yield, which you have taken out liquid yield. Okay. So what is the remaining? Liquid yield. So you have the M minus MF. Okay. So for make up this MF, we need to supply the MF amount of gas. Okay. Before entering to the compressor. So that's why it is called as the unbalanced flow condition. Okay. So the mass flow rate of the steam being cooled, this is the gas which is going to cool, okay, is greater than the counter current return steam, because you have already taken MF, which is the liquid yield. So what is the remaining? M minus MF is returned to the compressor. Okay. So we need to supply the MF amount of gas to compensate it. Okay. That's why it is called as the unbalanced flow conditions. Okay. In a
Sir,
refrigerator, yes, sir.
so does this mean that the flow is unsteady?
No, it is a, we have converted the gas into the liquid. Okay, and this liquid is our final product. Okay, so we have taken out this liquid. So what is the remaining the M minus MF. All the devices here we are using compressor or expander or heat exchanger work on the steady flow. It is means property is not changing with the
Okay.
time. Okay.
Okay. So, no, there it said that the liquid is accumulated, right? So, within the control volume, I thought that it is accumulating. So, it
Accumulation
might.
where we stored the product. Our final product is a liquid liquid. Suppose liquid nitrogen is our final product. Okay. So we can store somewhere,
Okay.
na. And coefficient of performance. So you know that what is the coefficient of performance? Coefficient of performance here, it is the desired output divided by the required input. So here that desired output is the, we need to cool the refrigerating space. So that is the QL, and required input is the work input you have given to the compressor. So that is the W in. Okay. So this is called as the coefficient of performance. But for liquefaction, we are using the figure of merit. So what is the figure of merit? That I discuss in following slides in details. Okay. For your here is the COP of the actual refrigerator divided by the COP of the ideal refrigerator. Okay. Later I will discuss in details. Okay. Both, if you remember, both having the work on the same thermodynamic principle, means the thermodynamic is the same for both the refrigerator and liquefier. Okay. Only difference is that design. Okay. The principles of engineering is quite different. As I told you that in the refrigerator, the working fluid is same throughout, but in a liquefier, it is an open system, means mass flow rate is not the same throughout the systems. Okay, so this is the basic difference between the refrigeration and liquefaction. So here, in a, when you consider the different cycles, which is differentiate based on the heat, which type of heat exchangers we are going to use. Okay, means the different refrigeration means liquefaction cycle has been means divided or categorized based on the heat exchanger used. Okay, so here the heat exchangers we generally use, that is the two types. One is the recuperative heat exchanger, another is a regenerative heat exchanger. Okay, so what is the recuperative heat exchanger? Recuperative heat exchanger, a device in which a separate flow passages are provided for the hot and cold fluid. If you remember the heat transfer, in which one chapter is that heat exchangers. Okay, so there is a parallel flow, counter flow heat exchanger. Here I have considered the wall for the, this is the wall which separate the two fluid. Okay. So it is a suppose hot fluid and cold fluid is flowing through the same direction. It is called as a parallel flow heat exchanger. Okay. And if it is in opposite direction, then it is called as a counter flow heat exchanger. Okay. So if you remember that the hot fluid is giving the energy to the wall, in which there is a mode of heat transfer is the conduction. Okay. And after conduction it transferred to the cold fluid. Okay. So that's why here it's written that in a recuperative heat exchanger, a device in which separate flow passages are provided for the hot and cold fluids. So this is a passage for the suppose hot fluid, and this one is the cold fluid. Okay. So the energy transfer from the hot fluid to the cold fluid through the walls where there is a conduction heat transfer. Okay. So here you can see that, and in a regenerative heat exchanger, what is the regenerative heat exchanger? Regenerative heat exchanger is a single set of flow passage through which the hot and cold fluid are flowing alternately and periodically. Suppose here what happens that suppose there is a porous media. Okay. So first hot fluid is coming. Okay. And it's giving the energy to the this porous, which store the thermal energy. Okay. And again when the cold fluids enter to the same passage, okay, this the energy which is stored in the porous is given to the cold fluid. Okay. So that's why here it's written that a single set of flow passages. Here you have a two flow passage, one for the hot and cold fluid, but here you have a only single set of flow passage through which hot and cold fluid is flowing alternately. Okay. Means when hot fluid is flowing through this passage, it will losing the energy, and that energy is stored by the porous media. Okay. This is called as the regenerative matrix. Okay. So it is given to the means energy stored in this regenerative matrix. Okay. Later, when cold fluid is coming, this regenerative matrix has been losing the energy and giving that energy to the cold fluid, and cold fluid is heated. Okay. So this process is periodically and alternately. Okay. Means one time hot fluid is entered, then cold fluid is entered. Okay. So that's why it's written that in regenerative heat exchanger, a single set of flow passage through which hot and cold fluids flow alternately and periodically. Okay. So here I have written the difference between the recuperative heat exchanger and the regenerative heat exchanger. So the recuperative heat exchanger very dependent upon the operating fluid. Okay. So which type of fluid you are using, it depends on this. Okay. But here regenerative heat exchanger, it is not dependent on the, or you can say that less dependent on the operating fluids. Okay. This is a DC type operations. If you remember that AC and DC. Okay. So here it's a DC type operations. Means hot and cold fluid is flowing through continuously flowing. Okay. And then hot fluid is exchanging the energy with the cold fluid. Okay. So this is the DC. If you in DC means direct current type operations. AC alternating current type operations means first hot fluid is entering to the passage, losing the energy to the or giving the energy to the regenerative matrix. Later, cold fluid is entering to the same passage and taking energy from the regenerative matrix. Okay. So that's why it is called as the AC type operation. Okay. Here in a recuperative heat exchangers have no moving parts at a low temperatures. But here moving parts at a low temperatures. I will discuss how to design the regenerative heat exchangers in the following lecture. Okay. Here just I am giving you the overview. What is the basic difference between the recuperative heat exchanger and the regenerative heat exchanger? Okay. Another difference is that no fundamental low temperatures limit as long as fluid exists. Okay. Here in the regenerative heat exchanger, fundamental low temperature limits is imposed by vanishing heat capacity at low temperatures. Okay. Another problem is that a recuperative heat exchanger, it is a bigger and heavy. Okay. Why? Because it is work on the high pressures. So high pressures typically required means they are bigger and way more than their regenerative counterparts. While a regenerative heat exchange is relatively low operating pressures. So if you are using the regenerative heat exchanger, it's work on a very low operating pressures. So that's why it is a smaller and lighter than recuperative heat exchanger. Okay. Here the effectiveness. What is the effectiveness? So effectiveness is the ratio of the actual heat transfer to the maximum possible energy transferred. Okay. So in case of the recuperative heat exchanger, we need a effectiveness is more than 95%. Okay. Otherwise, you are not able to get the liquid yield. Okay. So the effectiveness of the recuperative heat exchanger is more than 95%. Then you are able to get the liquid yield. Okay. So when I solve the numericals, I can change the effectiveness, and you can see that how much liquid, just reducing the 1% or 2% effectiveness, your liquid is becomes a negligible. You are not getting any liquid yields. Okay. So that is a very important that the heat exchangers you have designed having the high effectiveness. Otherwise, you are not able to get the liquid yield. Okay. In a regenerative heat exchangers, its effectiveness must be the 99% or higher. Okay. And the regenerative heat exchangers, which is used in the various types of the liquefaction cycle, as for example, Linde cycles, Hampson cycle, Claude cycle, Collins cycle, and Joule-Thomson cycle. In these cycles, we are using the recuperative heat exchanger. Okay. And regenerative heat exchanger is used in the Solvay cycle, Gifford-McMahon cycle, okay, Stirling cycle, Ericsson cycle, VM cycle. Okay. So in this way, means based on the which type of heat exchanger used, we can divide the different cycles used in the liquefaction. Okay. So in the recuperative and regenerative heat exchanger. Okay. Recuperative heat exchanger design you have already studied in our BTech heat transfer course, where you have considered the, if you remember that, to design the recuperative heat exchanger, that is the one is the LMTD method. LMTD means what? Logarithmic mean temperature difference method. Okay. And another method is that effectiveness NTU methods. Okay. So the design of the recuperative heat exchanger is comparatively easier than the regenerative heat exchanger. Regenerative heat exchanger looks very simple, but its design is very complex because we are going to exchange the energy between the hot and cold fluid with the matrix. Okay, regenerative matrix or porous. So that's why the design of the recuperative heat exchanger is comparatively easier than the regenerative heat exchanger. Okay, so that things I will discuss in later lecture. Okay, so now we should remember that what is the basic difference between the recuperative heat exchanger and regenerative heat exchanger. Okay. And what is the mechanism between the energy exchange between the hot and cold fluid in the recuperative and regenerative heat exchanger? Okay. Then here is the liquefaction of the gases. Okay. So gas liquefaction is a special case of gas refrigeration. Okay. If you remember that both refrigerator and liquefiers operate on the same principles. What is the same principle? First, the gas is compressed to an elevated pressure. You know that when we are compressing the gas, we use the compressor. Okay, to increase the pressure. So the gas is first compressed to an elevated pressure in an ambient temperature compressor. Okay. This high pressure gas is passed through a counter current recuperative heat exchanger. Okay, where it's exchanging with the ambient. Okay, then it's expand to a throttle valve engine, expansion engine. Okay. So if you remember when I discussed the steady flow energy equations, throttling valve is based on the isenthalpic process where enthalpy has been constant. Okay, but this process is the irreversible process. Okay, throttling process is the irreversible process, while the expansion engine, which is used to expand the gas, is work on the reversible adiabatic expansion process. Means what is the? It is the isentropic process. If you remember that I told you that all the reversible adiabatic process is isentropic process, but all isentropic process is not necessarily that reversible adiabatic process. Okay. So expansion engine it works on the isentropic process, means entropy is constant. Okay. That is used for the expansion process. Okay. After expanding to the lower pressures, cooling may take place. Means it has been the working fluid have taken the energy from the refrigerated space. Okay, cooling may take place and some liquid may be formed. So, but here after the expansions, the liquid has been formed. But in the refrigerator, you have taken the energy. Okay, energy from the refrigerated space. But here during the cooling, some liquid has been formed. Okay, and the cool low pressure gas return to the compressor inlet to repeat the cycles. So these are the four basic steps which is used in both the refrigerator and the liquefier. Okay, so the important thing is that is the expansion. Okay, I told you that upon expanding to the lower pressures, what I mean that liquid has been means gas has been condensed to the liquid. Okay, so we need to. So there are two ways to expand the gas. One is that throttling process. Okay, so you know that throttling is an isenthalpic process. Okay, and if you remember that mu Jt is equal to partial derivative of T with respect to pressure P at a constant enthalpy. Okay. So the Joule-Thomson coefficient so Joule-Thomson coefficient is a property of each gas. Okay. And is a function of temperature and pressure. And I told you that mu Jt may be positive, equal to, and negative. Okay. So if you remember the hydrogen, helium, and neon. Okay. Remember that hydrogen, helium, and neon having the Joule-Thomson coefficient, means a negative Joule-Thomson coefficient, means in this case mu Jt is less than 0. I will ask this question to three five two nine. Roll number 3529. Okay. 5539. Atish Kumar. 5539. Roll number 5539. Is not in meeting. What happened? 5539. Wait, 30. 3117. 3 Sriram.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is the meaning that if Joule-Thomson coefficient is negative, it is a heating or cooling?
Negative. So there'll be heating, sir.
Heating. But here our objective is to cool the gas. So, okay, thank you. So as your friend told that when the Joule-Thomson coefficient is the negative, it means that it is a heating process. It is not means temperature is increases. Okay. So what happens that if you want to use the hydrogen, helium, and neon as a coolant, then first you need to pre-cooled. Okay. If you want to use this gas as a refrigerant, then first you need to pre-cooled either by separate pre-coolant fluid or by a producing expansion engine, by a work producing expansion engine to a temperature below which the Jt coefficient is positive. Okay. So if you want to use this gas, means hydrogen, helium, and neon as a refrigerant, so first things which you do is cooled either by a separate pre-coolant fluid. Okay, this is the one method. Other is that or by a work producing expansion engine. So you can expand this gas in the work producing expansion engine below at temperatures at which the Joule-Thomson coefficient is positive. Okay. But in case of the nitrogen, methane, and other gases, which is Joule-Thomson coefficient is the positive, you can directly use this gas as your refrigerant. Okay. Nitrogen, methane, and other gases you can use because its Joule-Thomson coefficient mu Jt is greater than 0. If you remember that when the Joule-Thomson coefficient is positive, it means that it is used as a cooling. So means when it's expand, it's cooled. Okay. So nitrogen, methane, and other gases have a positive Joule-Thomson coefficient at ambient temperature, hence produce cooling when expanded across a valve. Okay. But when you are using this gas, first we need to use as a pre-coolant or expand in the expansion engine. Okay. Then you can use it as a refrigerant. Okay. So,
Sir?
Yeah.
So why would we use hydrogen, helium, and neon if for cryogenic purposes if they are already heating up in the throttling valve?
In throttling is used for the expansion to reduce the temperatures, because when you reduce the temperatures, then the gas has been converted into the liquid. I told you
No,
na
sir, I'm
upon
asking
Hmm.
why would we use such sort of gases if they are already heating up? Why won't we use some like nitrogen you said, which has the mu-J-T value positive?
Here you say that we directly use the nitrogen only if it is all cooling,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, there are a lot of cryogenics fluids. Okay, that things I will discuss in the later lectures. Okay, why we use the hydrogen, helium, and neon. And one more thing, here I skip the properties of these cryogenic fluids. This is called as the cryogens. Okay, there are a lot of cryogens. We are using nitrogen, oxygen, helium, hydrogens. Okay, and having a different behavior at the low temperatures. Why I skip this? Because there is one more subject which you are going to study in the next semester, that is the cryogenic process engineering. Okay, so in that subjects you are going to study the behavior of these heliums. If you remember that when you what is called uh, you may remember that solid has been converted into the liquid. Okay, uh, during the freezing. Okay, but in the helium case it is converted into the another liquid. Okay, so the properties of these gases has been means have a different behavior at the low temperatures. Okay, so these things I skip because you are going to study. You will going to study in the next semesters. And why we use this hydrogen, helium, and neons? When I discuss the different cycles, now I will tell you that what is the advantage of using this hydrogen, helium, and neons, and what is the advantage of nitrogens, methanes. Okay, so all the gases have different behaviors. Okay, so based
Hello,
on
sir.
your
Sir, you
yeah,
also said that hydrogen, helium, and neon have mu-J-T greater than 0 for certain temperature. Just
mu J T is negative in this case.
always,
Yes,
any temperature.
yes, at ambient temperatures we are talking about.
Yes,
You can-
and it could be having greater than 0 for another temperature.
When you expand it, okay, if you remember, there is a maximum inversion temperature. You can see that here. I have written that the maximum inversion temperatures for different gases. Can you see that the oxygen having the what are the maximum inversion temperatures? The curve I
Yes,
had drawn that something like this. This is the inversion curve at p is equal to 0. It is the okay. When it's cut, this inversion curve of this ordinate where at p is equal to 0, you are getting the maximum inversion temperatures. Okay. So the
yes, sir.
maximum inversion temperature of the oxygen is the 761. You can see that. Argon 722, nitrogen 622 Kelvin. All are the Kelvins. Air 603. But here you can see that neon, hydrogen, and helium having the 250 Kelvin, 202, 40. Now question is that if you remember that the molecular weight of the hydrogen is, what is the molecular weight of the hydrogen? 1.
1 kg. Sorry, 1.
1 or 2? Wait, 2 na, and it is the 4. Okay, helium. So you can see that it is the hydrogen is lighter than helium, but having the maximum inversion temperature is the 40 Kelvin. Okay, while hydrogen has the 202 Kelvin. So, so if this
So
temperature
a
is the
temperature below that maximum inversion temperature then the curve will generate like this, mean mu Gt
Yeah.
can be positive.
So you know that cooling in this left hand side of the inversion curve. Hmm?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So if temperature is above this, that's why we are using this neon, hydrogen, and heliums. It means we need to use a pre-coolant because of this maximum inversion temperature is very low, 250, 202, and 40 Kelvin. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, but at the
Sir,
ambient, yes.
sir, one doubt. Sir, we have a study in RAC, vapor compression refrigeration cycle, sir. Whenever ideal gas, for example, air, helium is used as refrigerant, throttling is never used for pressure reduction, as it does not any temperature drop. Sir, but यहाँ expansion and throttling both are used.
No, you are say that in a vapor compression we are using.
Sir, in RAC, we have a study in RAC, sir, vapor compression cycle. Whenever ideal gas, for example, air, helium, used as refrigerant, throttling is never used for pressure reduction, as it does not any temperature drop.
So for temperature drops, we are using the
Instead of throttling expansion, isentropic expansion.
Yeah,
Instead,
that's the isentropic expansion. But here, I'm going to discuss that why we are using the when will you use the expansion and throttling in the liquefaction. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So here I have written that the formula for this is the mu Gt.
Sir, one doubt, sir. Sir, here this helium and neon all are ideal gases, right? So for ideal gases, this mu Gt should be 0, right?
For all ideal gas? No.
Sir, for generally ideal gases, this Joule-Thomson coefficient must be 0, right?
We are here. You can see that, na. This ideal gas, all are the ideal gas you can consider. Here you can consider the ideal gas. Argon is the ideal gas. Helium is also all are the ideal gas.
Yes,
but it is not like this because we are going to what is the temperature scale we are going to study here. We are going to the minimum temperature is the 0 Kelvin. If you remember that at cryogenic temperature range and the 150 Kelvin. Okay. So this is not a. There is one thing is the STP, standard temperature pressures. If you remember that. Here we are going to discuss the behavior of the cryogenic fluids or the materials. Okay. Some materials is brittle at the ambient temperatures. Okay. But it is ductile at the low temperatures. Okay. So materials property is also changing when you will means it is within the cryogenic temperature range. Okay. And this 150 Kelvin, if you remember first lectures when I discussed about the cryogenics, this temperature it is not a fixed one, 150 Kelvin. It is the temperature generally the gases has been condensed into the liquids when the temperatures is around 150 Kelvin. Okay. So here the behavior don't compare with the behavior at the low temperatures and the ambient temperatures. They're both having the different. Okay. And all the gases not like this. What are the conditions? If you remember that when I discussed the Joule-Thomson coefficient, I told you that you can pass the gas. Okay, you can fix the what is called inlet pressure and temperatures, and reduce the pressures. Okay, so you can find that the temperatures has been increased, and one point where the temperature is constant means that it is not changing with the pressures during the isenthalpy process. Okay, so at that time mu Gt is constant, and then it is the decreases. That means temperature is decreases when the pressure decreases. Okay. So similarly, you can do the others for a different value of the inlet temperature and pressures, and when you means locus of this point where mu jet is the 0, you are getting the inversion curve. So left hand side of this inversion curve, this fluid means you are getting the cooling, not a heating. Okay, but if it is a higher, then it is a heating. So that's why here hydrogen, helium, and neon is need a pre-coolant, because you can see that its maximum inversion temperatures is very low, 250, 202, and 40 Kelvin. Okay, but in case of the air, nitrogen.
Sir, 1 minute, sir. Sir, but sir, we can also express this Joule-Thomson coefficient as 1 by Cp into T into dou V by dou T at constant pressure minus V, right?
Yes, sir.
So, sir, in that case, for all the ideal gases, this equation holds PV equal to RT. So, while differentiating this, while doing
here we are talking about this relations, na?
Yes,
for perfect gas, this is a 0. Okay. Now I will come on this point when mu h is equal to mu s. Okay. So don't worry, I will come on this slides. Why it is a change for the ideal gas? Joule-Thomson coefficient is always 0. Okay. And for
so sir, this equation is written irrespective of the temperature, right? So how we can say that at low temperature this is going to be less than or greater than 0 and not equal to 0?
I will come. Don't worry. I will come here. I will discuss when these things. I will come in the next slides. Okay. I will discuss these things in details. So first, yeah, I will come on this point. Okay. So here for the adiabatic expansion, okay, in the ideal case, the expansion would be reversible and adiabatic, and therefore isentropic. And the isentropic expansion coefficient, this is the Joule-Thomson coefficient. The formula it looks same. Okay, means here in the isentropic expansion coefficient is defined as the change in temperatures with respect to the change in pressure during the constant entropy process or isentropic process. Okay, so an isentropic expansion through expander always result in a temperature decrease. Okay, so if you remember that when gas expand, its temperature decreases, whereas an expansion through an expansion valve may or may not result in the temperature decrease. That is the things I discussed that. Okay, so between any two given pressure, so what you feel that which one is provided more efficient? It's obvious that its work on the reversible and adiabatic. It is a more means expansion engine is more efficient than the valve, because you know that all the device which work on the reversible process having the highest efficiency. Okay. Between any two given pressure, an isentropic expansion will always result in lower final temperature than will an isenthalpic expansion from the same initial temperature. Okay, but till now there is no expansion engine has been developed which used the liquid. Okay, so that's why. So that's why we are generally used the Joule-Thomson coefficient. Okay, so under which conditions this Joule-Thomson giving you the means approach to the isentropic expansion coefficient that I am going to discuss here. Okay, so here you can see that isentropic expansion unit implies an adiabatic reversible process, while isenthalpic expansion are irreversible. Okay, for this reason it appears that the expansion engine are preferable. You know that it is a work on the reversible process, so it is more efficient, but than the isenthalpic JT work. This is not always the case. Okay. JT expansions does approach or equal isentropic expansion efficient under certain conditions. What that conditions? That I am going to discuss here. Okay, under which conditions this JT expansion approaches or equal isentropic expansions. Okay. So here I have written that this occurs when the expansion is desired near or below the critical point. What is the critical point? If you remember the TS diagrams, where the saturated liquid line
Latent of
line.
heat is 0. Latent of heat is 0.
Yes. So if its temperature near or below the critical point of the process fluid, which is exactly the condition desired for the liquefier. Okay. So how I am getting these expressions that I am going to discuss, and ideal gas, how we are getting the expansions, your questions. So first we need to derive it. Okay. Later I will discuss what is the effect. Okay. So these things I am going to prove under which conditions. This is the conditions. Okay. So if you want to liquid means liquid yield. Okay. So your JT coefficient is work under these conditions. So first need to prove this formula. Okay. So for that I have considered. So here I have considered the H is a function of T and P. Okay. Then you have differentiated, so you will get that dH is equal to partial derivative of H with respect to the P at a constant temperature T dP plus partial derivative of H at constant temperature T at a P into dt. Okay. And you remember that Joule-Thomson process is isenthalpic process, means enthalpy is constant, so this terms dH is equal to 0 because of the isenthalpic process. Okay. Isenthalpic process. So what you will get that? You will get that. So you need a partial derivative of delta T with respect to the P at a constant H is equal to mu H. You know that this is a mu H is equal to minus partial derivative of H at a constant T okay. Then this one is, if you remember, this one is equal to the Cp. This is equal to the Cp. Okay. And this one I assume that as a phi. This one I assume that as a phi. Let. Okay. So what you will get that? You will get that mu H is equal to minus phi by Cp. Okay. So I need to find the phi. So I again assume that you know that dH is equal to TdS plus VdP. Okay. Okay. So now you can differentiate this one by with respect to the pressure. So you will get that delta H by delta P. Okay. Here I assume that it is a constant temperature T. Okay. And this terms you remember that I assume that 5, so you can write it the 5. Okay, is equal to t into partial derivative of s with respect to the p at a constant t plus v partial derivative of p by p at a constant t. Okay, so this term it becomes the 1. So you can write that phi is equal to what? So phi is equal to t into, and you are using the Maxwell relation, so you can write these terms. These terms become the minus partial derivative of v, okay, divided by the t at a constant pressure p. Okay, so you can write it. You will find that v minus, this is a minus sign, t into partial derivative of v at a constant with respect to temperature T at a constant pressure P plus V. Okay, so now you can substitute here in this equation. You will find that mu H is equal to 1 by Cp into T partial derivative of V with respect to temperature T into P minus V. Okay, so now we need to find for the perfect gas. Okay, so for the perfect gas, we know that V is equal to what? RTP. Okay, so now you can differentiate dV by partial derivative of P, V with respect to temperature T. Okay, at a constant pressure P is equal to R by P, and that is equal to the V by T. Okay, so when you substitute this value here, what you will find that mu H is equal to 1 by Cp T into V by T minus V equal to so that is equal to the 0. Okay, so here for the perfect gas, so what the meaning that when mu H is equal to 0, it means that if you are reducing the pressure, okay, what the mu H? Mu H, you remember that is the change in temperature with respect to the change in pressure during the isenthalpic process. So a perfect gas would not experience any temperature change upon expansion through the expansion valve. Okay, so here the perfect gas, you can see that because Joule-Thomson coefficient becomes the 0, it means if you are reducing the pressure, it is not going to decrease the temperature. Okay, so means the so that's why we are getting this one, means mu H is equal to the 0, means if you are changing the means decreasing the pressure, the temperature is not decrease. Okay, so the what is the meaning that this is a case of the for the perfect gas. So if the more imperfect gas, the better. So which is the more imperfect? The most imperfect gas known is liquid, means this is the reason we try to achieve the liquid state before the JT expansion. Okay, so before the JT expansions, we are try to achieve the liquid. The working fluid for this cycle is always chosen to be a liquid under the ordinary temperature. That is the critical temperature of the fluid is less than the ambient temperatures. Okay, so for a finding, means if you need a liquid yield, then the working fluid for this cycle is always chosen to be a liquid under the ordinary temperature. Ordinary temperature is what? The critical temperature of the fluid is less than the ambient temperature. Okay. So this is the region we are considering the working fluids. Okay. Another one you can consider the van der Waals gas. Here you can see that. What is the van der Waals gas? So P plus A by V